Welcome to Bonn Park. I'm Sarah Geidlinger.
And I'm Marshall Ward.
And today we have Joschka Sawatsky.
Joschka is a graphic designer and creative director of Ignite Group of Brands.
He's also just a cool guy that loves a font. We talked to him about his journey to becoming a graphic designer and how he's made a great life for himself in this field.
Here he is.
Welcome to Bonn Park.
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 Do you enjoy Bonn Park podcast?
If so, we would really appreciate it if you
Leave a review,
like, rate, subscribe, but most importantly,
share directly from the platforms
with your family and friends. That's the best way to get the word out to everybody, and more people will get to see our show that way. So click those like buttons and share our show. Thank you.
Thanks.
On with the show. This is it. We're going to take a moment to hear from this episode's sponsor.
Do you think you're brave? Think you're not afraid of things that go bump in the night? Prove it. Test your courage at Bingham and Screen Park if you dare. Or do you think you might get the heebie-jeebies in the twisted maze that awaits you? Might you feel a tingle on the back of your neck as you trek through the dead marsh? There are creatures in those woods, you know. They can see you, but you can't see them. Not right away. Let's see how brave you are at the slaughter shed. Don't worry too much. If you just can't take the frights, you can calm your nerves and refuel at the Blood Bar. You may not be quite as brave as you think once you step in Screen Park. You've been warned.
Marshall, I know you and your family are big Bingham and Screen Park fans.
Yeah, I'm a huge horror fan, and Screen Park is hailed as Ontario's most terrifying outdoor attraction, and my family can vouch that it is indeed a haunting and ultimately delightful walk in the woods. And the creators of Screen Park have done such a remarkable job of creating an experience that feels simultaneously scary and safe, which I appreciate.
So if your family likes to be scared as much as Marshall's does, tickets and packages can be purchased online through binghamans.com.
Screaming season is here.
And now back to the show. Okay, Joschka Sawatsky, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here with you guys.
So you are a graphic designer.
Among other things, yes. I did start as a graphic designer. That was kind of where I built my career from. I grew up playing music with some of my really close friends, and that sort of introduced me into the world of people that need design work done, essentially. The first person being myself in our band. So it was that kind of situation where we're like, well, either we can pay somebody to go and design all this stuff, you know, t-shirts, CDs, websites, all that kind of jazz. Or I can just learn how to do it myself and we can save the money. So that's kind of where I got my prompt to learn how to do what I do. So everything was self-taught and I kind of got off the ground that way. But eventually that spiraled into working with other businesses. I should say, sorry, first I started working for other bands and then other businesses. And I really started to focus on brand development. So that's still to this day the kind of thing that I'm most passionate about, the thing that I think I do best out of everything else. But yeah, so I was kind of going on that trajectory as primarily a designer. But then obviously with time and I guess with the acquisition of knowledge, I kind of leveraged that to be more of like a brand consultant. So that kind of gets into not only building the brand, but kind of framing how it plays out and working as, you know, an art director, a creative director, where you're involving other people and, you know, whole teams of people to bring one central vision to life. So I guess fast forward then to now where I am, after running my freelance business for, I think about 10 years now, which is wild to think, 10 years, holy moly. For the last 2 years, I've been working as the marketing director for a company called Ignite Group of Brands here in Kitchener, Waterloo. So now my role as a designer is still very much at the forefront, but I'm also the head of the marketing department, meaning that I coordinate a lot of stuff with our marketing team. We have a photographer, a social media manager, and a few other folks. And, you know, we do all like the media buying and strategy and all that stuff as well. So above and beyond just the actual execution and the visuals and things like that, I'm actually doing all of the planning and all of the strategic development and play out after that and everything. So lots of different hats on this head.
And how did that transition happen for you, going from working for yourself? Because I assume you were freelancing when you were working as a designer, brand developer, brand marketer. Mm-hmm. What was the word that you used? Brand developer?
I guess technically I go by art director in my freelance business. But I mean, yeah, it's tough to put a singular hat on it. But at my day job, I'm the marketing director. So there's that official title, I suppose.
So how did you make that transition from working for yourself to hooking up with the Ignite Group?
So I actually did some freelance work for them. One of our restaurants is called the Rich Uncle Tavern, downtown Kitchener. If you guys have been there, it's a nice little spot. But they actually hired me on to do, what was it that I first did? I think some like poster designs and just some miscellaneous sort of like print collateral, stuff like that. And they had sort of like a vintage aesthetic going on, which was pretty in line with the work I was doing at the time. So that's what they hired me based on. And then that turned into kind of a longer running, a few months long thing where they had me on for a bunch of different stuff as well. And then at the time they had a marketing manager who had worked with the company for probably about the first year or two when they first kind of got off the ground. But that individual left, opening up the position. So they approached me and said, we know you're freelance. We know that you're doing contract work for us, but would you ever be interested in working, as a full-time salaried employee as part of our team? So after some long, hard thinks and some assessing my life and where I see it going, I figured this was the right move for my career. And here I am, just about, I think, two and a half years later since I've come on. And the company's growing like crazy. There's all kinds of new stuff happening. So I think I placed my bets the way I should have.
I'm always so intrigued to hear that part of the story because I myself have gone back and forth between being a salary employee and a pirate. I call myself a pirate when I'm doing my own thing.
That is awesome. I'm going to start doing that. I'm sorry, I'm jacking it.
No, it's okay. I jacked it from my nephew, who's a filmmaker. And he's like, last time I was working at a salary job, he's like, come back, be a pirate with us. He kept saying that to us. So yeah, I'm back to being a pirate now, but I'm always so intrigued to hearing that part of the story because it is a hard decision. It's hard to let go of this baby you've created and be like, all right, we're going to try this whole thing for somebody else.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, but it's worked out well for you.
It has, yeah. And honestly, like one of the things that kind of facilitated that decision was the fact that I could keep on being a pirate, if you will, on the side. That's still really important to me is to have the ability to work on things that I want to work on, regardless of what's happening in my day job. I can always take on, fun brand projects and just cool work with people that I like to work with and brands that I'm excited about on the side and do that at my own pace and not have to feel like I'm only doing this so I can get a paycheck and pay my rent and survive. It's more of like, I have some extra time. I love what I do. Now let's do it for some stuff that I also love doing. Not to say that I don't love my day job. I love everything I do here as well. But like I said, it's nice to have that kind of freedom of selection.
I hear you. You have to be in it to win it. You have to keep that creative part going when you're just coming up with your own ideas and you're not necessarily working with a team who has revisions and notes and design changes, right?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Sarah and I enjoy a show on YouTube called Hot Ones.
Oh, we do.
It's on TV too, about hot sauce, right?
I have my husband hooked on it now too.
Yeah. And I've always loved hot sauce labels, and there's so many different directions you can go with it. And it's fascinating to me because it's not a big canvas to work on either. It's pretty small. And but in this case, Sarah and I have talked about how the one label that stands out amongst all the others is that first hot sauce you see, which is called the Classic. And it's just such a simple label that looks like it comes from another era and time.
I always say it looks like they just took a look, like an emblem of a 1920s plane and just put it on a hot sauce bottle and just said, that's our design. And it's just so clean and perfect. And the font is delicious.
So
that is a great way of describing fonts. I love that.
Why does that work so well? And why is that so timeless and just speaks to everybody? I think everyone would agree. If you looked at all the hot sauce labels, you'd say, well, the classiest, best looking one is that one.
Mm-hmm.
That is a good question. And I think that kind of applies to a lot of the design trends that you see, over the last couple of decades. You really start to see the revival of the vintage look, the regurgitated graphics, all these things that kind of took place in the past and are now sort of being reframed to fit contemporary needs. And I don't know, it's tough to say, but I think human beings in general have a tendency for the nostalgic. I myself am definitely one of them. So when I see something and I interact with something, as you'll see with a lot of my work, it has that kind of flavor of something that's been old and been lived in and been used and sort of has that character to it. So to me, that's something that speaks to everyone, where it feels like it's belonged to someone before and it's being used in a new way, but in a way that's different. When everybody goes left, you go right, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And it really calls back to you're remembering this from somewhere else, right? It's giving you a feeling. It's like sense. Like visuals can be like sense, and like and sound, like music.
Sure. Yeah.
It's really that senses thing. Talking about fonts, when I said delicious, my friend designer Esther Sanchez was helping me find a font this week. Something really weird, something super gothic, but I needed this certain amount of like serifs on the letters. I just couldn't find it, and she had me download that What the Font app. Do you have this?
Oh, of course.
This
crucial.
changed my life. I am a font nerd. I am definitely I love the typeface and the letter set and all that kind of stuff. But this thing's incredible. You take a picture of the font and load it in. It's like, is it one of these? Unbelievable.
Yeah, it's great. And the nice part is too, it gives you options. So if there's something that's, if it's not picking it up, first of all, it'll give you things that look similar to it. And it always links it right to myfonts.com. So you can buy the license for it just like that.
Just like that. It was so easy. Game changer. I'm scrolling through the Adobe fonts. I'm like, I don't see it,
Or I think about rock bands where like they get it right from the start. Like Metallica's name on the very first record. Yeah, it's like, that's amazing. These 20-year-olds, and I don't know who was marketing and helping them at the time, but they nailed it the first time. And that has been the perfect font for their name. All these.
Yeah, you couldn't think of anything else. That's literally nothing would fit that better than what it is.
Or like if a movie starts on Netflix or whatever we're watching a movie on, and the and the credit fonts are like Comic Sans or like that Greek one, I won't watch the movie.
Right.
Papyrus or whatever. Like I won't watch it. It's over.
Hey,
on that note, I was just gonna say, talking about subtitles, you guys have seen Avatar, correct?
Yeah.
They use Papyrus as their subtitle font, which is another one that's pretty much in line with Comic Sans in terms of humor in the design industry.
Oh, totally. Yeah. No, I didn't even notice that.
That's great. Sorry, I cut you off there.
That's okay. Working with clients, that's the part when I think about the work that you do that would be, for me, the most daunting part.
Come on.
Is trying to please. And I'm also talking about the fact that some people may just not even have the language that's necessary to explain to you what they want. Like they could show you stuff, but it's how hard is that working with clients and trying to execute something when you feel like they don't even know themselves what they want, right?
Do you hear a lot of, can you make this bigger and bolder?
Classic. Thankfully, I actually don't. I don't really know why, but I consider myself extremely lucky to never really get myself into those situations where I'm really struggling to discern what a client is looking for. I guess I will say that it's gotten easier and more streamlined over time for me, given that I've been doing this for a bunch of years now. As you're kind of getting out of the water and you're making your own way, you a lot of the time will approach a situation without necessarily having like a template of what to do and an idea of what to be asking for to get that information that you need to work. But I think like I said, at the beginning, it was a little bit harder to have those conversations and to know the right questions to ask, etc. But where I've come to now, like what I typically work with in a client relationship is before a project even starts on the design side, even before the research starts, I have a project questionnaire that I fill in with the client, or I send it to them to fill out. But essentially, it has probably about 15 or 20 different questions, all of which are specifically geared towards discerning the information that I need to start my work with. And obviously, on one hand, it helps me get a clearer idea of what they're looking for. But on the other hand, the way that I use it is to really force that business owner or whoever I'm working with that's behind the company is for them to think more deeply about what their company is all about, what their position in the marketplace is, how they speak to their customers, what essentially they want their brand identity to do for their company. So like I said, it's taken some years for me to really extract that process and find what works best for me. But I'm at the point now where I just start things off there and we have some solid conversations for, a few days or a week or two or so. And then that's when the research phase begins, followed by the design phase. So I kind of lay it out like that for projects.
What about restaurants? I think of where do you begin with a restaurant and branding a restaurant and helping them get signage and things that look just right for them? I think that must be like, man, you better get that right, you know?
Yeah, it's a whole different beast. It's funny, actually. I remember, so I took the job at Ignite here in, I think, February-ish of 2019. So I remember that New Year's, just before that, so like January 2018 or 2019. I just put it out there into the world. I'm like, you know what? Next year I would love to work on some more stuff with restaurants, maybe a brewery, maybe a coffee brand, and just floated it. I don't know if anything's going to come of it, but I was hoping to attract that to me. Next thing you know, I get offered this job here, and then that becomes literally my reality. That's all I'm doing 9 to 5 every day. So I kind of jumped in head first. And I guess to address the question there, it's a whole different ballgame when you're dealing with something that has a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of people behind it. A lot of the time, at least for the ones that I've worked on here, it'll be a restaurant that already exists. So it'll be sort of picking up where things are and kind of elevating that to the place that it needs to be. But yeah, it's like, for me, really at the end of the day, it starts off with the narrative. It starts off with the story and what the company and the owners and the people behind the brand are trying to achieve with it. So, be it the style of food that's driving the vibe of the restaurant, be it the interior decor, all of these things that kind of come together to fuel that intention of the brand. So for me to, again, going back to the project questionnaire thing, where I'm finding out more information and all of these really important details, these are all things that need to fuel the process. And I guess here, like, it's kind of double-sided as well too. There are restaurants that existed when I came on, but then there are also some that we've started from scratch. Like one of them, the most recent restaurant that we've opened back in October last year, literally launched that in the middle of the pandemic. So that was even a crazy shebang. Like, that whole process behind everything was just nuts, because the world wasn't as it normally was, and we had to find ways of navigating around that and really doing what we needed to do in a crazy time.
I want to back up here. So you obviously went to school for graphic design.
I did. I went to Conestoga College. I took their Bachelor of Design program.
So before you go to Conestoga College for graphic design, were you already playing with your band, or was this after school, or sort of all during this time?
So I had sort of a, let's call it a non-traditional approach to school. I started my degree when I was 27. So I had already, my band days were far behind me. I'd already been working as a freelancer for a number of years, 5 or 6 years. And I was just getting to that point where I had learned a lot on my own, and I was teaching myself and doing all these things in, my living room and out of my home office. And that was great. And it got me to where it got me. But eventually I got to this point of like, what do I want to do with my career? Where do I want to go? And what do I need to get there? And for me, the thing that answered that question most of all was some formal education. So that's when I started looking into school and kind of going back into that, like, just focusing on what I love to do and using that to elevate what I'm going to be doing moving forward. The Bachelor Design program really opened up those doors where it was meshing not only the design side, because like obviously graphic design was a big component of that, but alongside it was entrepreneurial business and, top level marketing and things like that. All of these like multiple facets that you need to run a business, at least from the creative and the marketing side. So to me, that really spoke to me because that's exactly the type of clients that I was working with. So in getting an education around that sort of leveled me up and, obviously expanded my knowledge base and my skill set, but also introduced me to a community of people that I still say to this day, like since I graduated, that's one of my biggest takeaways from school was the ability to become a part of a community that is so awesome, so self-supporting and thriving and just uplifting to everybody that's involved in it. So yeah, to me, just being a part of that community was a really, really big bonus of going to school. But yeah, so I think with schooling and, with my experience before that, that's all sort of snowballs into where I am now, I guess.
Your design program, I guess what you do is you get an assignment and then you have to create a product that is fictional, right? And and you go from there. And so what kind of instructions are given to you, like as far as that goes? Like, is it kind of like, all right, make this something for like, let's say a new beer or a whiskey or something. Again, it's fictional, but it's got to be a little bit badass and it's got to appeal to these people and it's got to, stand out on the shelf. Like, where do you even begin with those kind of assignments?
I mean, the nice thing about school stuff was it was sort of like blue sky situation. Sky's the limit. Literally do whatever you want. Obviously, follow the project brief and provide the deliverables that you're asked for. But you had that freedom to do whatever you want. So I think a lot of the time, there's obviously a lot of opportunity to be creative and imaginative and kind of frame things in the way that you want to frame them to suit that project brief. But actually, on that note, I think one of the things that I did differently than most people in school was I applied a fictional project brief for school to a real life client. Or I did something of my own accord, for example, starting a clothing company for a project in my second year, I think, that actually launched as a full-on clothing company, and it became like a living, existing thing out there in the world. So to me, there's always like a little bit of an extra push and an extra benefit in doing something that exists beyond the imagination, whether or not that actually goes to market and it's, you know, its own company or whatever. But even just having the physical asset in my hand or the artifact, whatever it is that comes out of that project, that was really important to me to do. So yeah, I guess like to follow the creative brief would be to just go over what the profs are asking of you. But then, like I said, there's a lot of room for interpretation and, you know, leaning into your skill sets and things like that.
Do you find yourself looking constantly at labels? I'll give you an example. I bought a eight pack of craft beer today, right? And the choice, the choices seemed endless, right? So there's a bunch of different sour beers, right? And one of them says tart and juicy in big Helvetica font letters, right? And it's like cherry and lime or something like that, right? And then there's another sour that's much, much more subtle, you know, very light kind of yellows and a little bit of pink and stuff like that. It's got grapefruit. And anyways, then there's something, just every kind of beer label you can imagine. Do you find yourself looking at this stuff all the time, or even just the small differences when Coca-Cola or Pepsi make a change, you know, to maybe a Diet Cola, there's little changes that happen. Are you looking at this stuff all the time? And what are you thinking about when you're looking at this stuff?
Absolutely, yes. I'm looking at it all the time. That's sort of the blessing and the curse of being a designer, in that you look around always. You're always analyzing things and, you know, using what the font to find whatever font's being used or whatever it is. But on the other hand, too, you also really notice the bad stuff a lot more. So, you know, as an example, are you guys familiar with the term kerning? Have you heard that before?
I don't know.
For anybody that hasn't heard of it, it's essentially the spacing in between two letters in a word. So tracking refers to the spacing between all of the letters in said word. Kerning is just in between two individual letters. So if I look at a package label on the shelf at the grocery store or something like that, and they have really shitty kerning or whatever that is, I'm like, that looks terrible. I can't unsee that. But I mean, at the same time too, when you see a really beautiful label, you say, what makes me think that's beautiful? Why is that so eye-catching? Why am I so drawn to that? So it's a constant situation of looking at things and analyzing them and taking inspiration or talking shit.
I have to say, when you were answering Marshall's last question, I wasn't laughing at you. I was just having a chuckle every time that the floor cleaning Zamboni was going by the window behind you.
Oh my God,
and
I wish
that we were sharing video for this. Like we only do audio, but man, it'd be fun to have the video.
Yeah, that was pretty funny. It was like a
was it really loud?
A moving painting.
No, it's just you could see him in this window behind you, just going back and forth.
Oh God! As soon as they fired up, I was like, "Oh my God, he's gonna do it." Like I'm in a pretty big room here, out in the lobby. So, anyways, I think he's done now. So hopefully, it's a little bit more quiet.
So, talking about things like kerning and really geeking out, I always love asking artists about their environment. So, you know, we've had some mural artists on who use just sketch paper, and then they bring that into Procreate on an iPad, or I'm living in Photoshop all the time. I'm always using that. But where are you living? Are you in InDesign? Are you in Illustrator? Where is your environment where you're creating most of the time?
Generally speaking, it all starts with a pen and paper for me. I'm a very tactile person. I don't consider myself the best artist by any means. Even, when it comes to lettering or anything like that, there's so many people that are like so good at hand lettering and stuff, which is amazing. But for me, it's really just about getting the idea down on paper, and to do that quickly and efficiently, it's just really quick sketches. So if you see side by side some of the sketches that I start my projects with next to the end result, you're like, how the hell did you get from there to there? So it is a constant process. But I think to your question of software and stuff like that, I literally use everything for whatever purpose that it's designed to be used for. And that is a very valuable lesson that I actually learned in school. To give you a little story tidbit with that, before I was in school, I worked a contracted gig for about 2 years, I think, working for a local music magazine. So I basically designed an entire magazine layout, probably 30 to 40 pages each month. I did the whole thing in Photoshop. So if you can imagine,
ouch.
absolutely brutal. Absolutely.
I mean,
like,
you would have to be the best layerer.
Exactly. Hyper organized with everything.
It's making me nervous just thinking about it.
Exactly. But it was because, like, for myself, I started my technological prowess, if you will, as a designer in Photoshop. So that's what I was most confident with, and that's what I was most comfortable and efficient with. So obviously that's what I used to do the work that I did. But I guess when I started school and I had all of these different types of projects that needed to be done, I really learned what made each one of those software programs what it was. So using InDesign for magazine layouts instead of Photoshop is way better because you can consolidate and standardize everything so much easier. Using Illustrator to design logos, Photoshop, obviously editing photos and creating kind of effects and stuff like that. So every single thing has its own purpose and its own thing that it should be used for. And I try my best to utilize each thing the way that it should be.
Some of the labels I've seen you make are like, I would describe them as incredibly exquisite. Mm-hmm. We had
that's so kind.
Nick Bender of the Fat Sparrow Group, Taco Farm, was here on our show. And we were talking about how tequila has like the best bottles, like the really good tequila is just these embossed. And I always think, how challenging is that to make something look just so incredibly exquisite without, I guess, kind of going too far with it? Like, what are you looking at when you're trying to design that? And how do you hit just the right spot? How do you do that so well?
Gotta keep it simple.
It's really, I mean, it's really hard. First of all, like, especially when you see things that have, intricate details and you see a lot of like the historically informed kind of stuff, you'll see a lot of those embellishments and things. And, being in these modern design programs that afford you the ability to do really intricate details at, nominally difficult effort, I guess, it can be very difficult not to fall into the trap of just throwing it all at the wall. Let's do this. Let's pack it all in. And then it just ends up looking crazy and busy and stupid. So you don't want to go that route. And then also you don't want to simplify it too much because that's not necessarily going to tell the same story that you're looking to do as well. So there's not really an easy way to answer it. It's really just like an ebb and flow and really working with the canvas that you're working with and making the most of it. And I can almost guarantee it's never going to be right the first time. Like for me, I spend so much time not only designing, but then when I say, okay, I think I'm done, then I'll spend at least another couple of days just looking at it and fidgeting and, tweaking little things here and there to get it to the finish line. But it's difficult.
We're going to take a moment to hear from this episode's sponsors. Bonn Park is supported by Fellini's Italian Cucina in Stratford. Fellini's restaurant has been serving up house-made Italian comfort food like pizza, pastas, and other classics for more than 27 years. Their pizzas, pastas, entrees, soups, breads, and desserts are made daily in-house by their chefs. And you can also enjoy all your favorite tastes of Fellini's in your own kitchen with a weekly selection of sauces, pestos, pastas, and more. A staple of Stratford's main street for years, Fellini's is perfect for a pre-theater meal or a cozy night of takeout. Drop by Fellini's Italian Cucina at 107 Ontario Street, Stratford. Check them out online at fellinistratford.com or have their amazing food delivered via Skip the Dishes. Buon appetito! We are supported by Dennis's Horseradish. Bonn Park's Marshall Ward first discovered Dennis's at Vincenzo's in Waterloo last year, and since then his whole family has been hooked. Dennis's Horseradish is a family-owned farm-to-fork horseradish producer in southern Ontario. Their horseradish comes from a family recipe that goes back generations, using only the finest roots. If you want to crank up the heat, you can get their horseradish in hot, extra hot, jalapeno, and more. They also offer a sophisticated Dijon-style horseradish mustard, a punchy seafood sauce, and a rustic beet relish. Find Dennis's Horseradish at Vincenzo's, Charles Quality Meats, and Sobeys locations. Check them out online at dennishorseradish.com and on Instagram. And now back to the show.
What would you do if you had something like so I've noticed something with taco places, fast food taco places use very similar colors and fonts. Like they're different taco places, but you can see what they're doing. They're using the same color palette over and over again. If you were to be hired by a taco place, would you be having a conversation that either said, well, let's look at what's really working for these other ones, or let's try to make you stand out in a different way? How would you approach something like tacos, for example?
It's something like that would really be dependent on what the client is all about and trying to achieve, because, obviously, oh my God, the Zamboni's back.
I love it. Is he in your room too?
Yeah, he just came through the door again.
Sorry, what I did want to point out is Taco Farm actually did take a very different approach. I'm talking about other ones like Fresh Burrito, Caseta.
Yep.
There's a lot of them that have a very similar look to them, right?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, obviously, like the ones that are all doing similar things, they're doing it that way because it works. Like there's a reason why you see fast food chains using red and yellow a lot of the time. Those are flavors that induce appetite appeal and excitement and energy and things like that. Everything that you want from a fast food place. Now, that being said, looking at Taco Farm as a perfect example, they're not a fast food place. They're way well above and beyond things like that. So you need to find a way to separate yourselves and not go the same way that everybody else is going. But I believe he did the branding for Taco Farm. So he did a really great job in framing that in a way that is, approachable and friendly and still has that kind of fun appeal to it that, a casual dining establishment would have. But he did it in a way that's different than what you would see in those fast food chains. So really, at the end of the day, when you're treating a brand for, a client in the culinary industry and the dining industry, or anything else for that matter, it's up to them and what they're trying to achieve with their brand. So as a designer, you're coming into the situation not as, an artist necessarily would, and saying, I have a vision, I think this should go this way, and this is the way to do it. You can do that, but you really need the perspective and the objectives and the intent of that client to be fueling the decisions that you're making.
When I look at your work, I can see some really warm blacks and beautiful browns and that. Is that were those colors you were always attracted to, and you seem to it's kind of your well that you go to for a lot of things? I know you talked a lot about what the client's looking for, but there must be things where you think, this will work again. This kind of is a go-to approach.
Yeah. Well, I guess to preface this, the work that I do, well, obviously I speak a lot about working with the client and kind of servicing their needs and making sure that their objectives are being met with a project. I'm sort of at the point in my career where I have definitely a style of the work that I do. Not to say that it's cookie cutter and the exact same for everything that I do, but I certainly have sort of a sensibility about what I do. And I think a lot of the clients that come my way are attracted to that. So in some way or another, there are kind of aesthetics and overarching vibes, if you will, that kind of can get consistently applied, whether it's through color or just like vintage design treatments and things like that. But yeah, I guess I would say that I'm a fan of the warm blacks and things like that. There's something to me about like pure white and pure black are so stark and so robotic and not friendly. So I tend to lean a little bit more towards, like the warm blacks and the creams in place of those stark blacks and whites. But that's very much just an aesthetic opinion. That's not really anything that carries substance. It's just, I think it looks nice.
And do your interests lie in sports as well? I think about sports jerseys and how they brand themselves, and all sports have different ways of, there's certain hockey sweaters that are just completely timeless, and there's no reason to change them. I don't think, it's hard to make some of them better. Eh?
Yeah, for sure. I'm not a huge sports head myself. I follow basketball a little bit here and there. I'm hugely into Formula One. That's my big sport of choice.
Let's talk about cool fonts. Like,
yeah, there's something else, but I do miss their old logo. I love their old logo. It was so nice, but you got to change with the times, I suppose. But yeah, I think like there's like on the note of jerseys in general, that's a constant thing. Every few years, you'll see a jersey update, even every year, small tweaks and stuff like that. And like I love the vintage 90s NBA jerseys, like looking at the Raptors first jerseys, the Vancouver Grizzlies, Chicago Bulls haven't changed a whole lot, but you know what I'm saying? Like all those mid 90s teams, like I guess maybe that's when I was growing up and really, really into basketball. So that's what going back to my thought before of nostalgia, people really like things that they've experienced in the past or make them think of a time in their life or anything like that. I guess that could be something for myself.
And that graphic design program you took, like it prepares you well. Like when you step out of there, you know what you need to do and where you need to go. I find with some, you could take a visual arts program at a university and just be like, and now what? Right.
Yep.
Yeah. I think it's one of those situations where you get out of it what you put into it. So if you go through an entire 4-year degree program and by the end of it, you still have no conception of what you want to do by the end of it, it's probably still going to be pretty difficult for you to find what you want to do. Because like for me, when I was going through it, I really gravitated towards the branding side of things. So that's the stuff that I was really picking up on and trying to learn as much as I could about the marketing and the entrepreneurship side of business in general. But it's not like a program that's designed to be like taking you in the front door after 4 years, spitting you out and saying, this is what you are now. This is the career path that you need to follow and go for it kind of thing. It's not like that whatsoever, which to me is really liberating. I think that's the best part of the program, is that it isn't so cookie cutter and deciding all of your career trajectory for you. You very much are empowered to make those decisions yourself. And like I said, getting out of the program what you put into it. So if you find yourself gravitating towards certain things, there's every ability for you to really follow that path and seek advice and guidance from your profs and make industry connections and all these things that start to form the basis of your career as it starts when you finish school. And
were you the designer of the Stockyard Brewing's new branding?
I was indeed. Yep.
So talk about that. That's a big thing to change branding. But also, we were talking about this a little while ago, Sarah and me, about how the word stockyard is a really interesting word. I don't think I'd ever would see it on a beer can, but it works really, really well. It's a very strong word, and you did a beautiful job with that design and a little story on the back of each can too.
I appreciate that. That was basically my last 7 to 8 months in a nutshell, is the Stockyards brand. That has been all guns a-blaring. It still is. I'm still like literally every day there's mostly Stockyard stuff that I'm working on, with some other stuff here and there too. But yeah, I guess like are you guys familiar with how the company started and where it pivoted from?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, but you know what, our listeners might not be. So maybe give us a little rundown.
Yeah.
Okay. And this is actually a good example of one of those big things in a designer's career that's really going to take precedence a lot of the time. And that is a company rebrand. So for the brewery and the coffee house here, basically, they both existed as an entity called Red Circle beforehand, Red Circle Brewing and Red Circle Coffee. Now that brand, Red Circle, actually existed, I believe, in the 1940s or 50s as a brand, like a grocery store coffee brand, essentially. They had them in those little old school tins for coffee. So that company went defunct a long time ago, and Ignite Group, the company that I work with, they purchased the trademark for that name, and then they decided to revamp it as a coffee shop and a brewery. So that was in 2018 when they launched first. And just in the catalyst space here, they built everything up as it was. But then as time went on, it became a situation of like, where do we want to see this company go? What do we see it being in the future? And obviously the big topic of conversation was expansion. Let's get out there. Let's get into the LCBOs. Let's get the distribution going further. Let's have a bigger presence than just here in the Catalyst building. So we eventually got into talks with another group in town called the Schlegels. Schlegel Holdings Group, I believe, is their official business name. So our company owner had some really great discussions with them, and they ended up coming into an agreement of basically partial ownership of the brewery and the coffee brand. So then with that in mind, and then with a lot of kind of big plans for expansions, then it became a question of, do we want to just be shoehorning all of this new stuff into this brand that exists that we didn't technically even really make ourselves? We just purchased it, literally the same logo. We had some really great people at Took, if you've heard of them. Great folks over there. They retreated that Red Circle brand, and they basically made it applicable to the contemporary market. So that's what we were using with for a while. But again, like looking at the future of the brand and not necessarily wanting to take something that existed outside of what we had built, the decision was made to rebrand the company entirely, start fresh. And that's where Stockyards came in. So I guess like the big thing to your question there earlier was the Stockyards as a name of a beer company, especially one that exists right now in Belmont Village here. The connection isn't necessarily apparent. And we did kind of allude to the bigger plans of the brewery and coffee house, which is a big expansion out to St. Jacob's Outlet Mall. So we purchased that whole building, and everything is going out there alongside keeping everything here as well. So with that St. Jacobs property out there, obviously it's right across the street from the former stockyards, which is where the farmers market is right now. So that's where the name came from. They wanted to pay homage to the history and the people that have settled this area and kind of built up our city into what it is. And with the move to St. Jacobs, Stockyards really ended up being that perfect name that kind of hit the nail on the head. And I'm very excited for ground to break out there and for people to start getting more aware of the bigger property coming out there, because that's going to answer that question of why Stockyards. There's still a lot of details being finalized with it, but essentially it's going to be, I believe, a 70,000 square foot facility, huge brewery, a coffee roasting facility, obviously a brew hall and a restaurant space, a coffee house, like a 30 or 40,000 foot event space, square foot event space, catering kitchen, like all kinds of stuff, just a massive facility out there. And then as far as I know, they're planning in the future, I'm not sure when this is scheduled for, but the plan is to put a distillery in as well too, and a higher end steak restaurant. So those things are very much still in the works, and ideas and details being thrown around. But the big thing to start off will be the brewery and the coffee house in there.
That's very fun.
That's pretty cool. You can spend a couple hours at the market and then head on over, and
that's exactly right.
There. Yeah.
That's going to be
I
fun.
think about all the tourists that come, I'm talking about international tourists that would come to town and discover that as well. And then that becomes one of their destinations next time they come back to town.
Absolutely.
Very cool.
I was going to mention too, like back to the Stockyards note, the emblem is the perfect kind of culmination of all the things that went into it. So it sort of stands for three things. There's the idea of cultivation. So you see the little leaves on the bottom there. We're very much tied to the agricultural community around it. Really kind of highlighting and elevating the farmers that we source our products from, and really kind of being a part of that community. So it's really important to us. And then the rays on the top is just to signify growth and the sun and the positive energy that exists just in the world and in nature. And then the middle part, which is probably the most prominent thing, it looks like an S, but it's almost joined and it almost looks like an 8. So it's double-sided, obviously S for Stockyards. But with the 8 sort of hidden in there. An interesting tidbit was when in 1975, when the farmers market out in St. Jacobs there was originally founded, it was founded by 8 people, 5 guys from Kitchener and 3 people from Waterloo, I believe. So that was sort of the basis of the framework of how that thing played out. And consequently, with our Stockyards build out and our property expansion out there, there's 8 people in the kind of group of ownership in that. So there's 3 people from the company I work with, and then there is 5 altogether from the Schlegel side. So sort of tying in that 8-person capacity and paying homage once again to the things that have existed in the past and have inspired us for the future.
And how do you decide on the color for those labels? So I've bought all those beers already now, Stockyards Brewing. Nice. And it's got like there's like one that's kind of a Naples kind of yellow, just really, really great color, very warm. One has a bit of a burgundy kind of, I can't remember. It's difficult to remember color sometimes, but you can remember how it makes you feel, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So there's a really nice color harmonies going on there. How did you decide on those colors? Oh, one has kind of a really nice green to it,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How'd you
That's
decide
actually
on
a good question.
Yeah.
They're all good questions, but just back to the idea of treating a rebrand for a company. So with Red Circle, we obviously had a product that existed, people that were familiar with the brand and what their packaging looked like, and all these things that kind of tied people's mentalities to what that company was. And our goal with the rebrand was not to basically throw everything by the wayside and just say, we're totally different now. It's literally the same company. It's the same people that are doing the brewing of the beer. So the recipes haven't changed there. There's like multiple award winners that are all being carried forward. So all of that stuff exists, and we didn't want to lose that. So color was one of the things that we used to kind of bridge the old with the new. So the ones that you're talking about there, those ones are all based on the colors that were used for those same beers that were a part of our core lineup as Red Circle. So our Iron Horse Trail IPA, for example, that just went out to LCBO. That's kind of our flagship beer. That kind of seafoam green that you see on there, I love that color, seafoam green, one of my favorites. That's the exact same Pantone color applied from the former can. It's just obviously now in a different layout with a different brand, but kind of using those colors re-ups the, familiarity with the beers in the past, at least to a certain degree. and hopefully encourages you to try them if you haven't already.
And it works really well because they're really kind of earthy colors, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. And I guess like the warm black comment from before, like this was a prime use of that. We use warm black in everything for stockyards because again, that stark black is a little bit stark and inhuman in my opinion. Not inhuman, but you know what I'm saying? Like it just has a little bit more of like a robotic feel to it. So with that warm black, that gives a little bit of earthiness to things, and it ties that nature element back to it. Very subliminally too, like not trying to be too over the top with stuff like that. But color is a great way to infuse meaning. I
bought some cans of Guinness beer today. Looking forward to opening those tonight. I'm thinking that there's a label that doesn't need to change anything.
Never change Guinness.
Can you talk about how, you've carved out a really cool life for yourself? I could picture you going back to Consulate College and giving a talk when you can do that again someday. And I'm certain those students would just be incredibly inspired and go like, wow, that looks like just the best job ever, dream job. Can you kind of take us out by talking about how, you basically carve out a life for yourself where you get to be an artist and a creative person and create incredible things that like literally thousands and thousands of people will see and enjoy, right?
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I'm a really, really lucky dude. And I think my core message is if I can do it, you can do it. It's really just designing your life and not succumbing to the status quo. If you're unhappy with what you're doing, there's infinite opportunity for you to do things that will make you happy and find ways of, making your life, infusing your life with the meaning that you want it to be. So yeah, I don't know. I guess for me, I've known at least to a certain degree what kind of things I like to work on for a long time. And I've constantly been looking at that as how can I do this to make money? What's the next step? What's going to be the next career move or next brand I work with or whatever it is. But there's all this opportunity to just, design the world as you like it, as you want it. And I'm a big proponent in working hard for it and, just chugging forward.
Hey all, thanks for meeting us in Bonn Park. Please like, rate, and subscribe to our podcast on the platform that you're listening to. And follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Bonn Park Podcast. Original music by Alan Lung.